Hello, this is David from DN Cognitive Counseling. First off, I want to say thank you very much to a patron who gave a very generous donation to help this channel, and I want to say thank you very much to Jennifer. Very much appreciated, so thank you. Now, to the question of the night, was actually asked by Jennifer, was in reference to the last video that we did in rich versus poor in mentality. And Jennifer brought up some very interesting points that I think need to be discussed as well as talked about. And the first question that Jennifer said was about the idea of financial literacy versus poor mentality. In other words, if somebody has financial literacy, wouldn't that help them to be able to change the way they think so that they can change instead of it being a mentality issue? And Jennifer, you're not wrong. Excuse me. Financial literacy is incredibly important to help change the mindset, because without it, you're going to not be able to if you didn't grow up with it. But financial literacy has nothing to do with whether or not you have the mentality. I have worked with many people that are very financially literate, that understand things very, very well, but their mindset and their context was growing up poor. And they, excuse me, they grew up poor, and what ended up happening was that even though they had knowledge, they didn't implement it the same way. So what ends up happening is that a person says, I understand what it means to be able to build a passive income stream, but I like to eat pizza Saturday nights. I like going to the movies. I like having my fun and enjoyment. I like taking my trips to Vegas. I like to gamble every once in a while. I like to play the scratch-offs. And the mindset of the things that they like take precedence over what they know. They send their kids to schools that financially put bigger burdens on them. They buy nicer houses or bigger houses and nicer cars in reference to sorry, I don't know what's going on tonight. They buy these things in reference to trying to help them out, to build on their lifestyle. And even though if you ask them, is this the right thing to do? Should I be doing this? They'll tell you no, even though they follow that mindset. So the mentality is still the problem, even though they lack the education. But yes, if you have the proper mentality, but don't have the education, you could still do a lot of things wrong. The next thing you spoke about, which was incredibly also true, was the idea that if you get an apartment, it could be vacant, and there's risk to owning it, or something can go wrong and you have to pay repairs, which is all true. There's no such thing in the entire world as a foolproof investment with no risk. It's just not nothing. You have a job, there's a risk of losing your job. If you have money, there's a risk of inflation. It doesn't matter the nature of the risk. There's always going to be risk. I mean, the nature of the asset, there'll always be risk to the asset class. So if you own real estate, if real estate drops, or there's a huge issue in real estate, or rents drop, or there's a gas leak, or a nuclear waste dump, and all of a sudden now the property that you owned goes crashing down, and that's true, that's risk. But when you learn about financial literacy, you understand there's a risk to every asset class. That doesn't change the definition of passive versus active income. So I'm just going to go very quickly what those definitions are, and then hopefully this will help to understand what that difference is. In active income, I need to work in order to get that income. In other words, if I'm a dentist, as long as I'm drilling, I'm making money. That's active, okay? If I stop working, all of a sudden now the COVID-19 hits, I'm now home. Oh no, what am I going to do? Right? I can't drill anymore. That's now I cannot work. Therefore now I don't make any income, no matter how good I am. Then there's something called passive income. Now, it's true that if there's a problem with the apartment or there's some issue that needs to be fixed, the person can hold back rent. But the fact is they still owe it. The aspect of what the rent is comes whether I'm working or not. I don't need to work on the apartment. In fact, I can have a management company, if I own a building, run the building. They obviously get a percentage, so I make a little bit less on the rent, but then I have nothing I have to do, and I make the income. So if I own 35 buildings, I'm giving you obviously a big number, and if I own 35 buildings, and I have management companies working all 35 buildings, I don't do anything, and the money comes. Now, if COVID-19 hits, all of a sudden now nobody pays rent, it's a risk, absolutely. So it's not that you get rid of risk. Having a passive income stream does not mean there's lack of risk. People put money into their 401ks in order to put money for their retirements. Now, the truth of the matter is, we saw what happened. The stock market crashes. You need the money now for some reason. You could be in a lot of trouble. That doesn't mean that putting the money away for your retirement was a bad idea. It just means there's a risk to it that we can never control. And that's true, again, of everything. There's a risk to doing certain investments, and there's a risk not to do certain investments. But let me help you a little bit more in terms of understanding this mentality. I was running a group many years ago, and I will never forget this because it was like yesterday. And it wasn't, but it was like it. And I was sitting and doing this group, and I was explaining the idea of putting away money and the law of compound interest. How things grow over time and how you make large amounts of money if you do things and it grows and it grows and it grows, but exponentially. It doesn't grow like doubling, it grows exponentially. 2, 4, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, it grows an exponential level. And one of the people who's sitting in the room says, wait a minute, I'm going to be like 60 years old before I get rich. I said, that's excellent, that's great. He's like, no, I'm going to be too old to enjoy it. And I said, well, how about leaving something to the kids to make their lives better? And he used an expletive and said them, and said, nobody left me anything. Why in the world would I leave anything to anybody else? That mentality was in his mindset, and it was in that room, there was a split. Certain people saying, wait a minute, that doesn't make much sense, and other people understanding that. And that was something that was very, very clear to most people, right, from an outsider's point of view, would be like, what do you mean? Because the mentality was, I didn't get anything, so why should I give anything? And the idea of it is that as you're building, the question is, what are you building for? But it's a separate question. And what are you building to do? Some people, it's like, well, I want to use whatever I'm dealing with, and I don't really care. Another idea of mentality. I had another client who I was talking about the idea of what his life is and where he's going. He goes, no, I'm fine. Everything's fine. I go, okay, so how much money do you have for retirement? He goes, retirement? I have nothing for my retirement, but I'm fine. I'm like, well, let me ask you a question. Are you going to work till what age? Because what does it make a difference? I go, well, let's assume for a minute you get sick at the age of 65 and you can't work anymore. How are you going to pay your bills? I go, the definition of fine is not saying, am I okay to pay my bills today? You know, it's very funny. Somebody said, you know, do you have enough money for retirement? Absolutely. If I live till tomorrow. That's great. But the reality is you may live a lot longer. So the idea of living till tomorrow as for your retirement is not a good plan. And again, it's not just about the idea of the education, but a mentality. It's about the way somebody thinks about their future, about what their responsibilities are, about whether or not they have ties to other people. Do they want to leave something to somebody else? Or no, I'm going to use every last dollar till I'm before I go. So all of that plays into the mindset and the role of how a person thinks. So I definitely understand what you meant by the need for the financial education. But the mentality is very different than the education. And you can have education and the wrong mentality, or you can have the education and the right mentality. And that makes a huge difference. What do you do on a Saturday night when you say, okay, I got a few extra dollars, quote unquote, and again, I hate that word, because when you're saying that means then you're not really looking at, am I taking care of my other responsibilities? Did I put it away enough for retirement? Am I planning for my kid's wedding? Am I worrying about whether or not somebody's going to college? Am I thinking about these things? Or am I, well, my rent's paid and I have food on the table. Everything's fine. That is not a financial education matter. It's a mentality matter. It's about asking the right questions. It's about thinking about the things in your future, or I'm only living in the moment. And again, with every investment, with everything that we do, and any money that you put away, you will be taking a risk. Rick Edelman, though, and I do enjoy a lot of the things that he talks about, Rick Edelman explains it is better to do something wrong and build to your future than do nothing. So doing the wrong things is still better than doing nothing. And that's absolutely true. Even investing poorly will lead to a better result than not investing anything at all. And you'll say, I don't understand why. Because the way that it works, and it's still, even if you guess wrong and you're putting it into a diversified aspect, you're going to do better than if you just did nothing and spent the money yourself. I use this example a lot, but it's really poignant. If you think about 60 years ago, how much a stamp cost, and now you think about how much a stamp cost. How many stamps could you bought with $100 60 years ago as opposed to now? So if you would have taken your money and saved it and put it underneath your mattress and said, great, I put my money, I'm saving my money. Yippee! 60 years later, how many stamps can you buy with that same money? What happened to the value of your money? Because doing nothing, you have a tremendous loss of purchasing power. So it's not a question of, do I need to do this? The question is, everybody needs to do it. The question is, though, your mentality is going to lead to what level your life is going to look like, what your mindset's going to be, what your risk tolerance is going to be. And all those things are basically about your mentality more than your financial education. Right before this crisis hit, I was talking with a friend of mine, and we were talking about the idea that this is going to be bad for the market. And I looked at him and I go, absolutely. So I said to him, so what are you doing? He says, I'm taking everything out. Take everything out of the market. I said, okay. And he said to me, so what are you doing? I said, I'm keeping everything in. And my plan is, instead of dividends coming back to me, that I'm reinvesting all of them. And he looked at me like I was out of my mind. And I said to him, and again, we're both financially educated about these things. His idea was, I don't want loss. My idea was, I want more gain. So mine is about building dividend income, which is a strategy. His is about building a nest egg that he's worrying about it going ahead and going up. The difference is that I don't know when it's going to go up. I don't know when it's going to come back, as certain things already have come back way back up, and certain things have not. One thing I owned went completely kaput. But you can't control for these things. You can only make the best decisions that you can. And again, it goes based upon the idea of, yes, risk, which, by the way, Jennifer, excellent point to point out. The other point, Jennifer, you pointed out, and it is absolutely true, 100%. I know I said in the first video how people are happy and wonderful, they're having money. And you said money doesn't buy happiness, and you're absolutely correct. Money has nothing to do with happiness. In fact, I made mention of the fact that I've had clients, right, on both sides. Most people don't seek out therapy because they're happy. There's normally some sort of problem, things are going on. And I will tell you, the difference between poor people's problems and rich people's problems is there is none. They all have problems, and actually very similar ones in different scopes, but very similar ones. What money gives you is the capacity and the ability to make more choices, not better choices. In fact, sometimes more money, you have the ability to make more worse choices, especially if you have an addiction. because you could get a lot more of your substance to kill you much faster than when you're struggling to go ahead and buy something for 20 bucks. So in reality, sometimes getting too much money too quickly could be a problem, and you're absolutely correct. But what money gives you is more choices. And I know the reason why I did this video and the reason why I did the last video was because a lot of people always say they want something. I want to be rich. I want this. And what I was trying to show is that a lot of people say they want something. What they really mean is, I wish somebody would give me. Right? I want to be rich. What are you going to do about it? Nothing. I'm going to sit here listening to a video from somebody just telling me something. Without action, it doesn't mean anything. You have to know what your risk tolerance is. You have to gain financial education, as you so correctly pointed out. But ultimately, what you need to do more than anything else is understand what your mentality is. Because if you understand the base mentality first, then the other things become much easier. So if you have the base mentality of, I want to make it better, and I want to learn in order to get better on this, then the education will come. Even if it's trial and error, your education will come. But if your mentality is, well, I got extra dollars tonight, it's time for pizza. Oh wow, I got a little bit of a raise, I'm going ahead an extra vacation this year. Then what you're doing is you're setting yourself up for long-term failure in this area of saying, I want to be rich. And that's really the mentality I was trying to help people to understand. The difference between somebody who doesn't understand that concept, and it's not just about financial education. It's about the mindset they have and the manner by which they're approaching it that leads them to be successful or not successful in this area. I hope that you found this helpful. And we could talk about, actually, in the future, if you're interested, the psychology between risk assessments and what people can tolerate or not, and anxiety levels, and what they think they can control or not. Because the reality is, more often than not, we control very little. I hope that this was helpful. I hope that you liked this video, and hit like if you liked it. If you didn't like it and you want to tell me why, I'd love to hear it. If you disagree with anything I said in this video, I would love to hear that. And again, if you want to be as generous as Jennifer and donate to the site, we very much thank you very much. And I again wish you a good night. And again, thank you for the question and thanks for the support. And we will see you again next time.